Hey y'all, I want to come on here real quick. I hope it's gonna be real quick because I be saying it and it's gonna be real quick. But I want to address something, okay? Because I've heard so many people debating this, and I want to be clear because as I've heard the debates, I've also reevaluated and began to really reflect on what I mean when I say what I say. Okay. And so today I want to specifically address the forgive yourself debate when it specifically comes to post-abortion healing, because I understand my point of view and I stand on it 10 toes down, but I've also heard why other people disagree with it. I actually got a close friend who she's like, I don't agree with it. I don't think it's biblical. I don't fool with it. And I've also heard other people who have flip this thing to be a very new age type of practice, or they use it and it's not in the same way that I intended for it to be used. So people who disagree with it from a biblical perspective or a spiritual perspective, let me not say spiritual, from a biblical perspective, when you see the people who agree with it from a different perspective, I understand why you disagree. Okay. But I want to address the debate and I want to clarify what I mean when I say I had to receive God's forgiveness and forgive myself. I want to further explain because I was even reading my book on that particular section and I was like, I really didn't even go into it too much. I just kind of said what I said because I understood what I meant. Okay. And so, like I said, I was watching a few post-abortion experience videos, and I noticed that, many of the girls was talking about how they had to forgive themselves, right? Um, but when they were saying it, it was from the place of I did what was right for me because of X, Y, and Z. And the forgive yourself part was a part of this idea that if I just forgave me, I would feel better or not have to deal with the pain or the effects of my decision. Does that make sense? And so I see a lot of people who are saying, I just need to forgive myself, absent of receiving forgiveness from God, absence of biblical truths, absence of all of these things. They were just saying, hey, I had an abortion, and one way that I healed was by forgiving myself. That's I've never said that was the way to do it. Okay. I stand 10 toes down on repentance and asking God for forgiveness and Him giving it to us based on His promises. Right. And so when I saw that people were actually saying this as a justification of their sin or to make themselves feel better about committing sin, I had to take a step back and be like, oh, hold on, let me clarify, because that ain't what I'm saying. If you hear me saying forgive yourself, it has nothing to do with justifying sin. It has nothing to do with making an excuse for why you believe that what you did was right in your own eyes, right? It had nothing to do with me forgiving myself so I could feel better about the decision that I made so that I would have to be able to now avoid the condemnation, the shame, the guilt. No, that's not what happened at all. At all. And so I also heard a few other people who were speaking on it from this new age point of view of womb healing, like when people start saying it, but this whole idea of womb healing and protecting the soul of the baby and keeping the baby from experiencing the abuse or the generational cycles that they experience. And so I was listening in and they were talking about, forgive yourself because, forgiving yourself is all a part of womb healing, or forgive yourself because, it's going to protect the soul of the baby. And I was just like, what in the world? This is the stuff I never heard of this stuff before. But the girlies, they out here saying this stuff. And so I'm like, this ain't right. So I began to study and, pray into this thing. And the Lord began to reveal to me certain things about like what people were doing. And so, in this name of self compassion, which means you're being kind and understanding toward yourself when you suffer or when you fail or when you feel inadequate, right? That's what self compassion is. But in this particular aspect, self compassion can be exploited, right? In the name of like being resilient or being courageous to do what you think is right. Let me say that again. So self-compassion, it means to be kind towards yourself, to be understanding towards yourself when you have suffered, when you fail, or when you feel inadequate, right? But in this aspect, specifically post-abortion, self-compassion can be exploited in the name of, oh, I'm resilient. Oh, I had the courage to do what was right, right? And I also believe that some people use this self compassion, the teachings of self compassion or grace towards yourself to manipulate you into believing that what you did was okay. And also to just further deceive you into thinking that abortion isn't that bad. And so you see the girls who are like saying, oh, man, I've experienced depression. I've experienced suicidal thoughts. I've experienced all of these bad feelings and emotions and consequences for my abortion, which they refuse to call murder, which they refuse to call sin. And they're saying, like, man, I feel horrible after this thing. I still feel horrible. And it's been years and years and years. And so you see all these girls who are going through and experiencing these consequences who have yet to figure out how to properly heal, how to properly receive forgiveness. And then you have these people who are like, just forgive yourself, just be self-compassionate. And the thing about self-compassion is that it promotes your victim status and it further confirms self-centeredness, right? And so when you're using this self-compassion, it makes you out to be the victim of abortion. And in some cases, there's some people who are victims of abortion. But a lot of the experiences and the stories that I was reading, it wasn't because they were a victim or that they were forced to or that they were made to. They made a decision that they thought was right at that time based on X, Y, and Z, right? And it further confirms like this whole principle of self-centeredness, this whole principle of pride and selfishness and I. So let me be clear on what I mean when I address forgiving yourself, right? So as I began to reflect on this topic, I realized that my experience of forgiving myself, one, it came third to repentance and receiving God's forgiveness. Two, it was more about a mindset shift, right? It was more so about a mindset shift, a mental transformation, as it related to making a decision to no longer believe the lies of the enemy that was keeping me in a place of shame and condemnation. Okay. And my kids are about to come in, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. And so I realized that in order to forgive myself, I needed to come out of agreement with the lies of the enemy about my identity and about how God now viewed me after the abortion. And so when I say forgive yourself, it was more so of like me shifting my mindset. Okay. Okay, y'all. So for me, forgiving myself, I never argued it to be some biblical principle, right? Because I would have gave y'all scriptures behind it. And so for me, it isn't a biblical principle that I found. It was a part of my experiences, realizing that I can continue to agree. And so maybe forgiving yourself isn't the right way to explain it. But it was me through my experience realizing that I can continue to agree with the lies of the enemy, or I can decide to believe the truth about what God said about me, right? The truth of his promises for me. It was about me renewing my mind and making the decision to let go of unforgiveness, or in other words, to let go of like self-hatred for the decision that I made freely, and now get into alignment with who God said I was, if that makes sense. And so for forgiving myself, when I say that, it's literally me saying like, man, okay, I forgive myself. I release all of the unforgiveness that I had for myself. I release all of the mental attacks and mindsets that I was experiencing. I release myself from being under the influence of the deception and the lies of the enemy, right? So forgive is to forget, to release, to let go of those kinds of things. And so that's what I decided to do. I began to release myself from the bondage of, girl, God can never forgive you, that kind of thing. And so see, and many people, I don't hear a lot of people talk about self-hatred enough, because I don't think that's really how we kind of define it in the moment. But when you start to look at what self-hatred is, it literally is just extreme criticism. And we hear all the time like we're our worst critics and all of the things. And self-hatred is literally extreme criticism of yourself. And so it's that feeling that, nothing you do is good enough. And so you can really start talking about how, self-hatred and shame kind of coexist and can go hand in hand to a certain extent, because it's that feeling of like, oh, nothing I do will ever be good enough. It's that feeling of unworthiness, or feeling that you are undeserving of good things in life. And we see how, just like with shame and condemnation, self-hatred also leads to anxiety. It leads to limiting beliefs, depression, insecurity, and even suicidal thoughts. But before they manifest into these things, it's simply the lie that you are no longer worthy of good because of your abortion. Okay, it's that lie that you are undeserving. It's the lie that you made the best decision for you and that baby when you decided to abort it. Because the truth is, abortion is never the best decision, even though at that time it may look as if it is. And so the truth is, no matter of the hate, or no matter if the hate is directed towards you or someone else, it's considered a work of the flesh, according to Galatians 5, verses 19 to 21. And so when we're having a hatred of self or a hatred of others, we have to now deal with that thing. And so for me, I can now choose like, hey, I forgive myself for this self-hatred. I forgive myself just like I will forgive somebody else who have hatred towards me. I forgive you, I can forgive myself. But it's never in a way of like, let me have self-compassion toward myself to excuse what I did. It's never under the skies of, let me have self-compassion, or let me forgive myself in order to ignore the pain or to overshadow the pain. Okay. So maybe we should, instead of saying like forgive yourself, it's like a mindset shift. Like after you receive God's forgiveness, now you begin to believe the truth about what he said. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that, make that clear. Let me know if you have questions, if that makes sense, all the things. And yes, I will be back in another video.